Hello and welcome to my channel. This is another one that was suggested by one of my viewers. So here's a charcoal portrait of Leo Messi. Let's start. This is the sketch. It doesn't look like much now, but we'll get there eventually. I'm going to work with charcoal pencils and some other forms of charcoal. The size of the paper is going to be around 9 times 12 inches. The charcoal pencils are Master's Touch woodless charcoal pencils, but first I'm going to use a little bit of charcoal powder. I created this charcoal powder by sharpening one of these woodless charcoal pencils. First I'm going to put down the charcoal dust to distribute it a little bit more evenly, and then after that I'm going to start blending. I'm going to blend using a combination of blending methods. I'm going to use paper towels or paper tissues and then brushes. The background is very simple. There's not much there. Just an out of focus bokeh background. I don't really want any shapes or suggestions of shapes. I just want to smooth it out and have a little bit of variation in value so that we can create contrast between the background and the main subject. In some areas where I need to put down a bit more value, I'm going to do that with a piece of vine charcoal. So in addition to the charcoal pencils and charcoal powder, I'm also going to be using vine charcoal for shading. I'm going to talk about all of these tools a little bit more during the drawing process, but now I'm starting to work on the main subject, and for that I'm using a medium charcoal pencil. The good thing about these pencils is that they can be sharpened to a very fine tip, so I can draw some smaller details with them. Obviously they are not as good as graphite pencils when it comes to that, but they are much darker and they create areas of darker value much more quickly. So I'm starting to work on the hair here on the left side, and I generally work from left to right because I'm right-handed. Here's an interesting hairstyle here with these long bangs swept to the side. So I'm going to try to capture that look, but I'm starting with the shorter hair here on the sides, and I'm imitating the length of the hair by trying to match the length of the hair with the length of my pencil strokes. I created the initial sketch by using the tracing method, but obviously the main part of the drawing process is the shading. Here around the ear I'm trying to create contrast with the background, so the tip of the ear is lighter than the background. I'm working around it using a tortilla and a little bit with a brush, but the point is that I need to have a nice edge to value and that I create some kind of a contrast in value between the ear and the background. So in some places the main subject or the main subject's head will appear darker than the background, and in some places it'll appear lighter than the background. The idea is to make the main subject pop out of the background. Here I'm using a Tombow Mono Zero eraser. It's a precision eraser. I haven't used this one in a while because I've misplaced it. Didn't know where it was. Anyway, now that I've found it, I can use it again, and you can see how I used it to clean up the edge to the left between the ear and the background. So now we have a nice edge to value. So I'm continuing to work with the hair, and the hair is relatively simple here because I'm just going to use the soft charcoal pencil for these darker areas, like for example on the bangs here, this part of the bangs which is facing down and away from the light. And I'm going to use the medium charcoal pencil for the rest. Just pulling these curved long strokes to follow the direction of the hair and to try to capture the look of his hairstyle. Like I said, it's important to vary the length of your strokes because the length of the hair varies in different parts of the hairstyle. And once I have that in place, I just blend. I blend with a brush, and what the brush does, it makes everything look a bit softer, more natural. It softens these lines and it makes the hair appear more dense. It gives it more volume and density, and it also gives it more value because you push the charcoal into those lighter spaces in between. That's another thing to keep in mind. So if you need to go back and make it a bit lighter in places with an eraser, I can do that as well. My camera kind of goes out of focus every now and then, so the footage is not ideal at all times, so I'm sorry about that. But I think you can still see what I'm doing. I'm pulling some lighter marks with this Tombow Mono Zero eraser to show some of the lighter hairs on the top of the head and to define the hairstyle a little bit better and give it a bit more texture. If you don't have the Tombow Mono Zero eraser, you can use the kneaded eraser or the Kohinoor pencil eraser. I use pretty much all of them. I just happen to be using this rectangular Tombow Mono Zero eraser for this one. I'm starting to work on the eyes. This is a part of the drawing that requires a little bit more precision. That's why I find it a little bit exhausting, because you have to be careful. You have to put everything in its right place. Now I like to have a nice detailed sketch like this before I start working, because it just makes the whole process a lot cleaner and simpler. Some people like to shade the large areas first and then flesh out the details a bit later. I've never been a huge fan of that approach, although I have used it, and I do use it sometimes in some other types of drawings. But with portraits, I tend to switch back and forth between drawing details and shading larger areas. But I generally prefer to work segment by segment, so I focused on this eye and the eye socket area here. And the important thing to remember is not to get caught up into tiny details like the eyelashes and the eyelids, but to step back every now and then and to pay attention to the larger values, to the amount of value in the eye socket area in comparison to the cheekbone and the temple and the eyebrow area, so that you can shade these accordingly. There's a lot of shadow here under the eyebrow area. There's only a small part of the eye that appears a little bit lighter, the lower eyelid area, and maybe a little bit of the eyeball to the left. Moving on to the other eye, which is somewhat uncharacteristic for me, because sometimes I will just do one eye and move on to the other parts of the portrait, even though it's usually a better idea to do the other eye immediately after the first one. So now I'm going to do the other one, and here also I'm using a combination of the medium charcoal pencil and a soft charcoal pencil, where I use the soft charcoal pencil sparingly for these darkest bits so that I could create that range of value. Generally the medium charcoal pencil is my main drawing tool. That's what I use most of the time, but sometimes when I want really deep, darker values, I just go over a certain area with soft charcoal pencil. I'm shading the forehead area using vine charcoal. Vine charcoal is soft, natural charcoal that can be blended easily, so don't worry about these lines. These disappear rather easily once you start blending. I will put down a little bit more of it in some areas because the area under the scalp, under the bangs, needs to be a little bit darker. The same goes for the left side of the forehead where the bangs are casting a bit of shadow. In addition to shading using pencils and vine charcoal, I will sometimes simply use a loaded brush that's already picked up a little bit of charcoal dust and sort of paint with it. So I just use the material that's already on the paper and I push it around, shading the lighter areas by pushing the charcoal dust from the darker areas onto the lighter areas. It's a very efficient way of shading, and it kind of feels natural because you don't have to switch between tools. You can just kind of push the charcoal dust around, and when you're working with charcoal, there's always a lot of charcoal dust flying around. I'm just putting down some finishing touches on the hair, and here on the left side of the forehead there are some nice shadows coming from these bangs. I want to capture these because this will make the forehead area look more three-dimensional. It'll make the bangs stand out against, or rather in front of the forehead. So it's important to try to capture those smaller shadows. Now here I'm actually using a black colored pencil for some of the smaller details, smaller wrinkles, and some of the finer shading. So a black colored pencil is basically a black pencil that you can use to help you when you're working with charcoal and you want some light marks or to create marks with more precision. You could use a graphite pencil, but it doesn't really work that well with charcoal, because charcoal is much darker and much more matte. Here I did the right side of the hair and the right side of the head, and I'm going to pull some highlights there as well with a pencil eraser. So another thing that you can use in addition to charcoal is a matte graphite pencil. I often combine matte graphite pencils or black colored pencils with charcoal to draw some of the smaller details. I have done portraits where I use nothing but charcoal, but I usually like to use at least a little bit of the black colored pencil or a matte graphite pencil or something. I'm going to make the background a little bit darker here on the right side so that I can create a bit more contrast between the ear and the background. And I'm shading the rest of the background here. Like I said, there doesn't have to be anything specific in that background. I just want a little bit of variation in value. The reference, by the way, is in the description as usual. You can have a look at it, compare. I just picked one of his photos off the internet. Just picked one that I liked. I actually have done a drawing of Messi before, but only once. It was a long time ago, and it was a very small portrait, a smaller size portrait, and I've done that with a graphite pencil. Anyway, I'm working on the beard here on the left side of the face, making these tiny short marks with a medium charcoal pencil. So just like with the hair, I have to adapt the length of my pencil strokes to imitate the length of the beard and the length of the facial hair. And here too, you can see that I'm switching back and forth between medium charcoal pencil and a soft charcoal pencil, and again, of course, I'm going to use the medium charcoal pencil 90% of the time, whereas I'm going to use the soft charcoal pencil very sparingly. The soft charcoal pencil is a bit crumblier and it's a little bit darker, and I just use it here and there for some of those darker shadow areas, like for example here at the bottom on the chin area, or the beard area around the chin and the neck. There's a lot of shadow there, and the hair is more dense there, so I'm just using a little bit of darker value there. That's why I switched to this soft charcoal pencil. Now here in other areas, I'm just going to use a medium charcoal pencil. I find that you have to be patient when you're drawing facial hair, because you need to try to capture the, how should I put it, the distribution of the facial hair because it's just as important as the hairstyle in capturing the likeness of the person. I'm doing a little bit of blending with a brush. You'll notice that I'm using a couple of different types of brushes. Different brushes blend a little bit differently. I have soft synthetic brushes like the one that I'm using now, and I have harder bristle brushes which push the charcoal a little bit harder into the grain of the paper. So I like to have options. I use a couple of different types of brushes. They're usually all flat brushes because I just find it more easier to control the when I'm blending smaller details with these flat brushes, and to preserve the edges with them. Anyway, I'm shading the left side of the face, or his right side of the face, by adding a little bit of value using vine charcoal. Vine charcoal or willow charcoal, it's natural charcoal that's made by burning wood. It comes in these curved sticks of irregular shape. They're very good for shading, and it's a lot more difficult when you have to do everything with a charcoal pencil. And once I put down a little bit of vine charcoal, I'm blending with a brush, making sure that these cheeks look kind of gaunt, and that there's shadow under the cheekbone area, and also a little bit on the sides of the nose here to the left. I switched to a black colored pencil again to do some light shading and to draw some smaller details like some finer textures on the skin and stuff like that. Just making sure that I work around the nostril area here so that the nose isn't too narrow or too wide. That's very important. And kind of working my way down the cheek area, shading it carefully using a combination of different drawing tools. And when I feel like there's a little bit too much texture, I just blend a little bit and soften it with a brush. As a final touch, I'm going to work with a pencil eraser again, with this Tombow Mono Zero eraser. I'm going to pull some lighter hairs on the left side and make the left side of the face here a little bit lighter, because it's exposed to the light source, and because some of these hairs are kind of glistening and reflecting a little bit of light. Maybe they're of lighter color, maybe they're just catching some light from the light source. It doesn't really matter. They do appear lighter to me, so I'm going to draw them using a pencil eraser. And that's going to make the beard look a lot more detailed and more realistic. You can see that the Tombow Mono Zero eraser is allowing me to pull these relatively thin, relatively fine marks. The key, of course, is not to press too hard with your charcoal pencils, because then you will bury the charcoal into the grain of the paper and it can be a little bit difficult to do some of that fine erasing. I also did a little bit of erasing around this cheekbone area to make those cheekbones stand out. And a few more lighter marks around the mustache area. I'm going to finish the rest of the mustache area using the medium charcoal pencil. Again, trying to pay attention to the length of the pencil strokes. There's also a little bit of shadow here on the lower side of the nose, because it's facing away from the light source, which is coming from above. So just adding these short marks, imitating the direction and the length of the hair. In some places I will just switch to a soft charcoal pencil to add a little bit more shadow. I can make some parts of the beard and the mustache a bit darker either by putting down more material, basically using more pressure or making more marks with a pencil, or when that's not doing the trick, I just add a little bit of soft charcoal pencil like I did here at the bottom. But I want to make a gradual transition between the two. And this eye socket area is also very important because the eyes are largely in the shadow, and it's important to have enough shadow there under the eyebrow area. I'm shading the neck using vine charcoal again. The neck is for the most part a bit darker because of the shadow coming from the beard and the jaw area. It's especially going to be darker in the middle. I'm curving my strokes a little bit, trying to produce a little bit of texture to imitate the appearance of the skin and the shape of the neck, but most of it is going to go away once I blend. This part in the middle is going to be a little bit darker. I'm blending with a brush, softening those lines a bit and distributing the charcoal dust more evenly to push it into those lighter spaces. That's the good thing about charcoal. You just blend it so easily, especially when you're using vine charcoal, and you can cover large areas very quickly. Sometimes that doesn't help you much because you need more precision and you need to be careful when drawing certain areas, but most of the time it speeds things up. Anyway, I'm working on the jersey here. Maybe could have picked a simpler jersey. There's a lot of these stripes here, but I'm going to simplify them a little bit. Working on these with medium charcoal pencil. And then I'm adding these short hairs on the neck, the part of the beard that is under the jaw area, on the throat and the neck area. Just want to have a lot of them and make them curve a little bit and make it look random. So with the beard, especially if it's shorter, you need to pull a lot of strokes. There's no way around it. This part of the jersey here is at the bottom is a little bit darker. I'm just going to make it darker by going over it with a brush, and that's going to push the charcoal into those lighter areas. I'm going to leave the top part of the jersey above the shoulders a little bit lighter. And I also made some suggestions of folds in the jersey, but there's not much detail there. Right now I'm focusing on the nose and making sure that I shade this very important part of the face. I say it's a very important part of the face because it's as important as the eyes. It's important to shade the sides of the nose properly so that it's not that it's neither too wide nor too narrow. And first I shaded a little bit more of the right side of the face so that it would be easier for me to gauge how much value I need on the nose itself. And now I'm doing a little bit more precision work with a black colored pencil. To those who've been following my work, you won't be surprised to see that I like to use a black colored pencil in combination with charcoal. I've been doing that for years, and even though I say this is a charcoal portrait, well, I do most of the work in charcoal, but I do like to use other tools as well. I'm doing a little bit of erasing here on the nose. There are some lighter areas on both sides of the nose. So now the shape of the nose is very close to what it's supposed to look like, so I'm shading the face on the right side, putting down some finishing details on the eyes, just fixing the shape of the eyebrow and the eye socket area a little bit, adding a little bit more shadow. And also defining the lower eyelid area a bit, drawing some of these smaller wrinkles and things like that. I'm just going to go over some parts which maybe need to be a little bit darker. I'm just going to go over them with a soft charcoal pencil, and then with an eraser I'm going to add a little bit more hair here at the top. And then I'm continuing to refine the mustache and the beard area, because I felt like some of these areas needed to be a little bit darker. And once I had a sufficient amount of value, I decided to pull a few lighter strokes and give that beard and mustache a bit more depth, because when you pull these lighter strokes you make it look like some of these hairs are sitting on top of the other ones, and you just create a feeling of density and depth in the facial hair, in the beard. Adding a little bit more here on the neck as well. Now I'm going to shade the rest of the background here to the right, but I'm also going to make the background a little bit darker to the left as well, because I need more contrast between the neck and the background. So I put down a little bit more value using vine charcoal, and now I'm blending that with a brush. You can see how I can go around the edge with a flat brush. And to further increase the contrast between the background and the main subject, I'm pulling the lighter details on the neck using the Tombow Mono Zero eraser, making the edge of the neck and the beard lighter than the background. And I'm going to do the same thing here on the right side. Just going to make the neck a bit thicker as well. And here I'm drawing some more of these stripes because I need to finish the rest of the jersey. Just refining the appearance of some parts of the face, making the nose a little bit narrower, adding a little bit more shadow here above the nostrils and on the sides. I also need to finish this ear, the shading and putting down a bit of value with a brush, and then deepening some of the shadows and making the shapes a bit more three-dimensional using charcoal pencil, and then working around it and working on some smaller shapes using a tortilla, and as a final touch just pulling those highlights with Tombow Mono Zero eraser to make the earlobe look more three-dimensional. I'm going to finish the rest of the jersey now using a combination of medium charcoal pencil and a black colored pencil. Like I said, I'm going to simplify this a little bit. It doesn't have to be super detailed. I'm going to put my signature on the left, and now the portrait is done. I hope you'll like it. Don't forget to check out my other videos, and if you want to see the full-length version of this video and more content, check out my Patreon. Bye bye.